Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Omar Rafiq, and I'm a federal sales engineer, and I also will be joined by Sean Martinez, also a federal sales engineer. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Phones are muted. Questions can be typed in the question answer tab, and we will respond as time permits, more than likely at the end. The session is being recorded and will be emailed along with slides in a day or so. So let's first begin with our agenda. We'll do a brief overview of SolarWinds, as well as a security compliance overview. We'll talk on how security compliance we can help you with some of the SolarWinds products, and then we'll do the much anticipated product demonstrations, and then finally we'll end with questions and answers. So SolarWinds started back in 1999 as a network management software company. We have expanded our management and monitoring portfolio to include systems and applications, storage, databases, and security, provided to government agencies worldwide. You can see some of our impressive results: over 150,000 customers in 170 countries. Our federal customers include every DoD, civilian, and intel agency. Our IT management software is powerful, affordable, and easy to use. We have a unique approach to the market that has proven to be quite successful. Our mission is to provide purpose-built products that are designed to make IT professionals' jobs easier. We offer value-driven products and tools that solve a broad range of IT management challenges, whether those challenges are related to networks, servers, applications, storage, virtualization, database, or the cloud. We are going to talk about FISMA, RMF, and STIC compliance, and not other IT mandates such as recent Data Center Optimization Initiative, DCOI, or FITARA, and all that. We have some great tools for system management and capacity planning, and our platform is a great help with infrastructure consolidation, but that is a topic for a different seminar. So the NIST FISMA implementation was created to set guidelines and controls to protect the nation's IT infrastructure. There are standards based on mission impact, security standards for data and IT systems, as well as creating baselines for implementation and assessment of security controls and making sure that they are effective. FISMA provides and establishes security controls, and RMF uses those controls in its framework. Organizations must identify assets and infrastructure and ensure that implemented security controls are being adhered to, not only in the IT infrastructure, but also end-user policies are being abided by. They must also ensure that the controls and policies are effective and identify any vulnerabilities. We all love DISA-STICs. I can hear people chuckling in the background, but these guides do reduce vulnerabilities. Of course, you need to identify systems and software so you know which sticks to apply. Monitoring and managing configuration is important for multiple reasons. You need to make sure that there are no mistakes made in the configuration of devices, as they could lead to exposing your IT infrastructure, and of course, vulnerabilities in the firmware can be exploited by hackers. I mentioned that everyone loves running compliance checks and generating reports, but what is even more fun are audits. And as everyone knows, getting ready for an audit is no small task. Reporting on asset inventories, vulnerabilities, configurations, access levels, and so on requires knowledge of systems and software in the infrastructure. Of course, the reports and data provided must be accurate. So how can SolarWinds help you being with all these compliances and being compliant? SolarWinds provides multiple tools to help organizations in this area. So let's kind of take a brief look at each one. The Network Configuration Manager provides configuration management of all your network devices, plus a lot more, and we'll go into more detail in a bit. Network Performance Monitor, or NPM, gives you the ability to monitor the performance of your network and provide metrics and statistics, and provide availability and fault isolation of anywhere from small networks to huge networks. The Log and Event Manager, which is the SolarWinds SIEM, works in real time and provides not only log collection, but also a very powerful correlation engine and active response, again in real time. The Patch Manager, or PM, giving you centralized Windows patch management to include third-party patching. IPAM, or the IP Address Manager, provides IP address management from a central location, also provides DHCP and DHCP scope management, as well as DNS and DNS zone management. Last but certainly not least, User Device Tracker, or UDT, provides switch port management, but also can track devices based on MAC addresses and alert you when a rogue device connects to your network. So let's talk a little more in detail about each one of these products. The SolarWinds Network Configuration Manager automatically discovers, profiles, and manages devices connected to your network. It helps ensure that devices are configured and operating in compliance with regulatory standards, making standardized configuration changes in minutes across dissimilar devices. It also helps you build an automated and reliable backup schedule for your routers, switches, and firewalls, and other network devices. It allows you to identify and manage iOS security risk using the NIST National Vulnerability Database CVE integration, and always demonstrate compliance to critical security standards using out-of-the-box automated compliance assessments and reports for DISA-STIX, NIST FISMA, PCI DSS, and a few others. You can use automated remediation scripts to correct out-of-compliance issues. The Network Performance Monitor, or NPM, quickly detects, diagnoses, and resolves network performance issues and avoids downtime by optimizing your network. It automatically calculates exhaustion dates using customizable thresholds based on peak and average usage. Real-time network performance metrics with interactive charts and graphs from your network devices, as well as being able to schedule and generate custom network performance reports with one of over 100 out-of-the-box templates, which of course can be completely customized, or you can create your own templates as well. The Log and Event Manager, or also known as LEM, receives instant notification and remediation by processing log data in memory in real time. You can get out-of-the-box compliance for HIPAA, PCI, SOX, ISO, NCOA, FISMA, FERPA, GILBA, NERC, GPG13, and many more. You can correlate event data from thousands of sources in real time using built-in SIEM event rules to remediate threats in less time. The Patch Manager not only does patch management for Windows via your WSUS server, but you can save time by automating third-party patching and publishing. SolarWinds Patch Manager lets you automatically download, publish, and patch popular and commonly used third-party applications. It also provides a great asset inventory feature. IP Address Manager, or IPAM, you can automate subnet discovery and IP scanning. And of course, the scanning itself scours your network, so you always know how IPs are used in your network. You can find an open IP and make the DHCP reservation and DNS entries in one motion from a single console. You can get the complete info on all of your IPs, whether it's IPv6 or IPv4, and know how they've been used even in the distant past. And User Device Tracker. You can always know who and what is connected to your network, and when and where they are connected without tracing cables or digging through ARP and MAC tables. You can easily identify and locate unauthorized users. The UDT helps you quickly find rogue users on the LAN or wireless network. It also allows you to remotely shut down a compromised network port with just a point-and-click simplicity. You can actively control who and what connects to your network. And by the way, this fully integrates with your domain controls. You can also track users. So let's talk a little bit about the FISMA security controls. As I mentioned earlier, these controls are leveraged by RMF, so I guess you could call them RMF security controls as well. So access control. Both Log and Event Manager and Network Configuration Manager can help with access control, for instance. The Network Configuration Manager not only manages device configuration, but also can run compliance reports at a touch of a button and can also check for firmware vulnerabilities. And the Log and Event Manager can detect login activity that is out of the norm or enable auditing of local or domain user accounts. Audit and accountability. The Network Configuration Manager can track and send out alerts on configuration changes, who made them, and what time they were made. And the Log and Event Manager can send out notifications if any processing fails, and of course, LEM uses timestamps from the source log to keep track. Configuration management. As mentioned earlier, Network Configuration Manager can run compliance reports using pre-built templates for DISA-STIX, FISMA, SOX, HIPAA, PCI, and more. Patch Manager and LEM, or the Log and Event Manager, also satisfy some of these requirements. As far as incident responses are concerned, the Network Configuration Manager uses a real-time change detection feature that can alert you when a change is made on any monitored network device. And again, as mentioned earlier, LEM's powerful correlation engine and active response feature can generate incidents from tracked data which can be reported on and stored. System maintenance. Network Configuration Manager can keep track of configuration changes and keep a complete history of those changes, as well as require approval before a change is implemented. And the Log and Event Manager can report on anomalies in logs and also when, for example, a disk space is getting full. The USB Defender provides media protection. It's a very popular LEM feature that can detach and disable a USB port based on certain criteria being met, like, for instance, an unauthorized USB device. As far as security planning is concerned, also mentioned earlier, the Network Configuration Manager can set up an approval system before a change is implemented, and LEM can audit and monitor for patterns and/or anomalies in logs. Now, LEM and Patch Manager, and to a lesser extent, Network Performance Monitor and Network Configuration Manager, and User Device Tracker provide tools that can help with personal security risk assessment, systems and communication protection, and system and information integrity. Network Configuration provides compliance reports right out the box. We've mentioned this several times, and it's one of the most popular features especially with our DoD customers. To check compliance for a network device, it's just a matter of selecting a report and running it. You can also run a remediation script or even set up auto remediation. The real-time change detection feature will alert you as soon as someone makes a change, a configuration change, and of course the iOS firmware vulnerability scanning will alert you to potential vulnerabilities. Now, we use an SCAP API to connect to the NIST National Vulnerability Database to check for those CVEs that may be applicable in your environment. And for those users, and of course 99% of our federal users are disconnected, you can actually download the NIST National Vulnerability Database and point the tool to the local copy of that. The Log and Event Manager, as mentioned earlier, is a real-time product, and it's important to note, you would think about, well, logs being real-time is not that big of a deal, but because the Log and Event Manager does provide you a very powerful correlation engine with several hundred pre-built rules based on best practices, which have these active responses, it is important to have it in real time. So not only will LEM alert you via an email, for instance, of an event, but also will send a pop-up message to the offender, log him off the server, disable the account and domain control, and if necessary, even shut down the machine. That's when it becomes important that it's real time. And of course, STIG and FISMA reports are included. Here are a few resources. As I mentioned earlier, this presentation will be emailed to everyone, so you don't have to write them all down. But just to give you an example of the resources that are available for some white papers and things of that nature. So enough about slides. I know everybody is anticipating the product demo, and my colleague Sean Martinez will help us out with that. Sean?
Great, thank you so much, Omar. Yeah, as mentioned, my name is Sean Martinez, and I'm a senior field sales engineer here at SolarWinds. Let me go ahead and jump to my screen here. Okay, great. So, as mentioned, we're going to be going over, all the products basically that Omar mentioned. I'm also going to be going over a lot of the highlights or a lot of the features that he also kind of mentioned here as well. So, so just kind of giving an idea of what we'll be kind of going over in here. So the first product that Omar mentioned was the Network Configuration Manager, which, as mentioned, had the ability of doing our configuration management, retaining and storing configurations, having real-time change detection to let you know when those configurations have changed. We actually do have change reports built into the web console, so you can select for most recent configuration changes against your entire infrastructure or a selection of devices. One of the other focuses of our configuration manager as well is, just the basic, backing up your running and start configuration. Now, we also do include some additional, just basic visual checks to let you know, has anyone logically committed, the running to the start configuration. And one of the things we actually have in our summary page is an interactive resource. That way you can see a list of devices that might have some conflicting information between those two configurations. That way we can just go ahead and manually download on the fly. That way we can make sure that, is there truly a conflict, or did someone really truly need to commit, to that device. There's also going to be giving you a history of devices that we recently backed up as well. That way we can give you kind of that report, of the entire environment, just a subset of the devices. And then also mentioned was the ability for you to set a common compliance system within your configurations. That way, based upon maybe the role of the device, the location, where it is within the actual network itself, maybe it's a WAN or a core device. So each one of those devices might have some separate set of policy, common configuration policies that you might want to utilize. And so, you can actually utilize our policy violation, which is our compliance policy report system, to report back whether we by default will show a critical, informational, or warning issue, but you can also change those to be a category 1, 2, or 3 type problem as well. So you can kind of have those reflected to whatever type of naming structure you want to see for a better visual of that information. So actually change that information in this policy report system. Now, one of the features that Omar also mentioned was the ability for us to do a lot of the dysdig configuration checks. We do actually include over 50 reports with our configuration manager. There are additional policy reports that you can also utilize your SolarWinds server to connect back to our forum site to download the configurations, or you can actually just go to the forum site and download those configurations manually in case you have an offline system. That way you can get some of the updates of some of these configuration compliance reports that we have, but these cover a lot like Brocade, Dell, Cisco, Palo Alto, Juniper type devices, F5, and these are actually fully customizable, so you can create your own custom reports. Because a lot of these dysdig policies are FISMA, NIST, HIPAA type policies, some of them are very exacting, some of them might be just based upon your area, your classification of the network. Those rules might have different rules in there, so you do have the ability of very easily customizing these individual checks to see what should be in the configuration that might be missing, or remove something from the configuration that might be in the system. So that's kind of one of the things that we actually built into this, the compliance policy system is a very basic system, so you can just do, like text pattern matching in case you just want to check to see if something is there or missing within the configuration, or you can do regex expression if you want to be more of an expert when looking for whether it's like a global configuration or just a certain area of the configuration itself. And we actually do have a remediation system built in, so that, like, if there was an issue with, like, this looking for the banner login information, if that was missing, we can go ahead and go into like configuration terminal, write the type of information that we need into the system, and then commit it to the device. And you can actually have this automatically execute whenever the script has been found. By default, our reports run at 11:30, and you can go into our settings to change that time period. Or what most customers will do is just have this sitting there, letting us know whenever this type of reports is being violated, so that way you as a user or as an administrator can just run these on your devices, see what type of issues we're seeing on those configurations. Then whenever you see those policy or these violations occur, you can then just run those scripts on just this device or on all devices in violation. And then over time you could then just automate it if you so want to, if you so choose to. And then one of the other big, features of the configuration manager is also the, let's see here, into support, into sales. So we will be able to also report to you when your devices are about to expire. That way you can find out, are they going to be, making updates for the system for, foreseeable future, or do we need to possibly prioritize to replace that device? Now there will be links taking you back into that device details, which will actually give you a little bit more information about that system. And then from the configuration managers, like summary page or the configuration management page, if you select it on any device by name, it would then actually take you back over to the node details. That way we can actually show you the configuration history with our network performance monitor, or like our NetFlow traffic analyzer, so we can show you some of the other modules that come with this web console. Really, the one last feature of the configuration manager before we move to the network performance is also the CVE monitoring. So with the firmware vulnerability scanning of our system. So what we can do is, as mentioned, we can go take a look at the NIST.gov websites. This right now works for Cisco devices. We'll be adding some more vendors in the future. What we do is we're looking at the Cisco iOS image version, and we're comparing that against the NIST.gov data, and then we flag it as a potential vulnerability, and then you as a user can then confirm it or say it's not applicable to the system. And then we also gave you a flow process as well, so you can work through the remediation or waiving these, all devices or specific devices due to these type of NIST issues that have been found. So as mentioned, that pretty much covers the configuration manager. So as mentioned, we can go over to the next module in here, which is the Network Performance Monitor product. So the Network Performance Monitor has the ability of monitoring the status of your devices and then also the performance of the system. So your more basic CPU, memory, interface status, interface performance data, and having that represented in our web console. That's kind of one of the basic core competencies of our system. And then we actually do have some other newer features that I'll also be making sure to cover here as well, like actually, we'll be touching in here, actually, first off, is one of our newest features, which is actually called NetPath services. So this actually gives you the ability for you to very quickly detect and diagnose and understand what is going on with your layer 3 type of issues. Because what we're actually doing is running a simulated transaction across a URL and a port number, and then through our SolarWinds agent, which can be local on the SolarWinds server or any Windows system, we'll then run a test to show how data is flowing internally in your network, but also if the endpoint is external to your network, like through an internet service provider or going to a cloud service provider, we can actually show you your performance information as well as the network response time and latency outside of your network. So one of the things we're actually looking at here is I just brought up NetPath services for Office 365. So what this is saying, that this is starting from this source IP address going to the office.com or port 80. And this is showing us all of our layer 3 connections. So the best way to kind of understand this is kind of giving you a visual trace route, since this is actually showing us all the layer 3 data. But this is also showing us the specific time period. So we can see this is what we saw on our most recent poll. Well, you can actually look at, less than an hour ago, we did see there's some performance issues. It says the latency was jumped up to about 248 milliseconds. So just by selecting that time period, it's now taking us back into the past, and it's actually going to also encapsulate our network performance monitor data with our network configuration monitor information as well. So whenever we did see a response time spike on a layer 3 device, we actually saw that was internal to our network on this router 3. So here I can actually, there's a link so I can actually go into that node details of that device, or just by very quickly mousing or clicking on that system, I got the most recent, that latency based upon that time period, the CPU memory interface utilization. If I click into that interface, I can see the packet loss, the error rate, the bandwidth of that interface. But then also, if you have our NetFlow traffic analyzer, we will also encapsulate that with this module in here. And then take this a step further, since I just covered the configuration manager, this also does include the real-time change detection, so that in case we do see a configuration change, we will automatically show you that configuration change, bold it out in here and color code it. That way we can help you to identify, why are we seeing this configuration, which is so the configuration change occurred on this router 5. So if I clicked on this device, say if I clicked on it into a new tab, I can then jump from this basic visual trace route of the response time, and then jump from this layer 3 data, then take us into the network performance monitor as well as the configuration manager, since we already have this module in here, to give us the network performance monitor data for CPU and memory, routing table information, interface status, interface performance, and then get all this information encapsulated all on this page. But then, as I mentioned, there's that subpage for configurations. So that way we can also get the configuration changes, the configuration violation reports, also the real-time change detection configuration reports. So that way I can see why did we see that response time issue at that selected time period. Now, you do have a lot of customization features available to you, so that way you can make this your own. That way, let's say that whenever you do click into a device, let's say that you want to have maybe this radio gauge, maybe this default route change at the top, maybe some CPU load. So you can see I can actually make these changes on the fly from this web console. You can resize the columns. There's also going to be a customized page at the top right. That way you can really kind of make this kind of your own, and then have all the pertinent information, whether it's on the all details, or even if you want to add your own tabs, so that way maybe the help desk will have their own details, maybe an overview about what's going on with this device. So that way whenever someone's calling in, they can get some performance details, whereas the sysadmins, network admins can get more of the performance details, more in depth. And then let's see here. Some of the other information with the network performance monitors mentioned was also the ability of tracking utilization. So we will be able to show you the interface utilization and history of those interfaces. We also do track network topology as well. So as long as you are monitoring, say you're monitoring a server and then you monitor your switch connected to that server and you monitor the router, we'll show you how all those links are connected in there. And that was also showing us the interface speed. So that way, in case there was full saturation, I can then understand why are we seeing that saturation and then see the uplink devices. That way we're automatically correlating all that information and giving you all that information without you having to click back to a summary page or go to a map where it's automatically inclusive in these node detail resources. And then when I just clicked in the interface, you can see we get our basic details from the interface status, receive and transmit percent utilization. You can also see the bandwidth speed in here and see the current traffic. And then by default with the network performance monitor, we store and track all this information for you by default. But you can also change that to be stored for 2, 3, 5 years or longer. That way, in case you want to utilize this information, not only for tracking your issues for performance, but also helping to understand or helping to prioritize which devices you might want to figure out for lifecycle replacements, or figure out which ones do you need to get circuit upgrades. You can also kind of change those retention periods as needed to help you identify that information whenever you'd like to. And then also one of the other big issues areas that's also covered in the network performance monitor is the ability for you to identify protocol latency delays as well as your network health and availability. So really the network health and availability would come into our NetPath services, but also our other feature in here, which is called quality of experience. So that way we can actually show you what is going on with your network response time per protocol, but also the server and application response time. And this is really designed for not only our network performance monitor customers, but also any customer that owns the server and application monitor module also has this feature available to them. And this is really designed for our network admins as well as our system admin side to really help them understand where do we need to go first investigate for these type of protocol issues. Because usually whenever a customer comes to us saying that there is an issue with the website or an issue with a share or something, they just say that they have an issue, but we don't really know whether we need to go look at the network first or take a look at the application response or the application or server itself. And so really the quality of experience as well as the NetPath services are designed to help you to get that information. NetPath services will show you the response time against the layer 3 information. The quality of experience is actually going to show you the actual end user traffic. So what you can do is do port spanning on a switch port, or you can deploy this onto a Windows server to do 30 applications per server to monitor the protocols. And then this is actually representing the average response times, actually showing us what we're seeing in the chart data, which by default is showing us for the last 24 hours. So that way you can kind of understand that what this is showing us is this is the network response time. So this is actually your TCP handshake. So whenever your application is doing your SYN-ACK type of handshake data, we're actually breaking that apart within the packet itself to give you the network response time averages over the last 24 hours, but then also the peak value over that given time period. And then to take it a step further, we're actually looking at the time to the first application content byte to then give you an idea about your protocols, server, and then endpoint device average response time, but then once again the peak value as well. So here, since we're looking at the network performance side, if there was an issue with like FTP, we could see that there is an average issue, or the average latency is 3 seconds, peak value is 13 seconds. So if I click into that protocol, one of the first things we can actually do is with each protocol we can actually tag a category, a risk level, and productivity rating. Since we need to separate out what is mission critical versus what we need to make allowable to the network, you can actually take the productivity rating and extend it out for really your quality experience, or for what you should have for your access, because then you can actually flag it as both business and social, or flag it as business only or social only, and then set your thresholds as needed, so that way you can make sure that mission critical is meeting its absolute requirement of getting through the door, and then social is being slowed down through some of those QoS settings. Here you also have risk levels, so you can see if this is possible misuse of the network, and then also categories, so you can break it out whether it's like file transfer, database services, web services, and these are all going to be interactive, so you can actually break that out per protocol. And the protocol, you'll also have your, as mentioned, there's thresholds, so you'll have the network and application response time. And you can see that we set a response time. I think this one's usually just over 2 seconds. And so that's the reason why it's showing that as a critical issue. And this is actually going to be showing us our transactions and our data volume. That way you can actually see how much traffic was sent per protocol. But then we can actually then, since we know this is the network issue, I can then mouse over and go into that server. Since we are tracking the server for server performance, I can mouse over from most recent server performance or click into the node details for server performance data. But as I mentioned, one of the features of the network performance monitor is the ability for you to tie this in through topology data. So whenever you're monitoring your servers and then you monitor the switches and then the upstream routers and data, here we can actually see the switch port is saturated. So then we can just jump over straight to the upstream device to figure out why is this device having that saturation issue. So then from jumping from the server, we're now going to the upstream switch or router. So here we can see this router 3 is currently connected to this device. And it was saying that under its route change, it actually did see a route change that currently happened about 14 hours ago. And then you can actually get that with that flapping routes. So here in the network performance model, we're actually giving you that type of availability and type of visualization of what is going on with the availability of not only the device but certain segments of your network. And then to take it a step further, you could go to the configuration manager. So if we had if this device was managed with configuration manager, we would have that configs tab on the left side so that we could go then into the configuration history to figure out what changed on the configuration, who made that change with that configuration, and get that information kind of represented on just on a details page. But you can also set up your own custom summary pages as well so that you can encapsulate the network performance monitor with the configuration manager, but then also some of the other modules like our server and application and user device tracker. And this kind of gives you a quick summary detail of really the configuration manager and the network performance monitor, so you can kind of see how you can set up your own kind of custom summary views in case you want to have some remote locations shown up. You can actually get a mapping system. We actually include that with all the modules so that we can kind of get a heat map against those interface links. That way you can get a quick visual and actually make this available on a projection screen and TV screen. And speaking of that TV screen projection screen, we actually built a NOC view into our web console system, so that way you can actually get this as a presentation layer, and not only representative of our web console, but also outside websites. So like that's showing National Weather Service. Say you have like Remedy or ServiceNow. You could also show those web resources into this web console. That way you can get an overall active alerts about what's going on with your infrastructure and then see what's going on with most recent performance information. That way your network and systems team and virtualization and storage have that at a glance view about what's going on with the entire infrastructure, but also they could just log in and get a role-based access of just the devices that they're responsible for under the NOC view as well. So that way they can just focus on what's specific to their actual role. Okay, so since we covered a lot here of the configuration or the network performance, I'm going to jump next to our next modules. Next module I'll go into is our user device tracker. So what's nice about the user device tracker is that if you've ever utilized there's a tool out of our very well-known engineers toolset tools called Switchport Mapper. Switchport Mapper gives you the ability for you to monitor down to the switch and switch port where those systems are, but one at a time. So what we actually did is we took that product and we actually made an enterprise module, so that way you can scan the entire infrastructure to see where all of your devices are down to the switch port, and VLAN. And we give you that capability so that you can very easily search based upon a MAC address, IP address, or host name of the system to see where that device is located. But then we also give you the ability for you to have those systems watched in our device watch list system. So that way, let's say that you have an unauthorized device on the network that you need to pick up because the security team has requested this to be monitored and picked up. You can get that built. There's actually a built-in alert to be notified about where the current location is, also whenever it does enter the network. And then also one of the additional features we build in with the system is the ability of having that port history, so that whenever we see the system, we can then go into that device to see where it was currently connected, but also the history of the connections so that we can get that information in case we do need to turn that over for security incidents. And then to also take this a step further, we can actually hook into your Active Directory domain controller so that in case you do have domain connected systems, we can then show you where users are logging in We can actually give you your Active Directory information so you can have your contact details for the user, the Active Directory groups that they're assigned to. But then we actually look at the security logon events from the domain controllers. That way we can see what users are logging into those systems at what time period. So you could actually, instead of searching by system, you could search by Active Directory user and then see which systems they most recently logged into, which makes that a lot simpler, especially for troubleshooting maybe some network connectivity issues from their devices. The device tracker does also have the capability of also, letting you know, based upon the MAC addresses, the known vendors of those MAC addresses. Because what we do is we take those MAC addresses, since those are always going to be static, and we break that out into the vendor. And there's going to be this vendor report that's actually interactive, so you can see which ones are like Broadcom type devices, or you can go back to see which ones will be Dell or Xerox. And you can get that information set up in a report as well, which is one of the capabilities in here. And really the last real big capability of this product is also the ability for you to take actions whenever we have, let's say we want to basically shut down or turn on a port. So if you go into any Cisco-enabled switch port, you can actually turn on or shut down the port on demand. We're actually doing SNMP set commands to just do the shutdown and turn on, so that way you can just do it per port. And then once again, there is role-based access, so that way you can limit who has the capability or authorization to make those changes. Great. And that pretty much covers the device tracker. So really the next module we'll be covering in here is the IP address manager, which is really complements and works with the user device tracker. Now, the IP address manager works with your DHCP servers directly, like Microsoft DHCP, Cisco IOS, ASA, and ISC DHCP server. But we can also work with scanning to make sure we can get some information about your IPv6 devices too. Now, one of the things we actually link back to the user device tracker is IP address conflicts. That way, in case you do happen to have like a static or a dynamic conflict or scope overlap, we'll actually integrate that data, so that way in case there is a problem, you can then go into that switch port and then hopefully you can shut off or shut off that port to resolve that conflict. And then once it's been resolved, you can then just turn it back on. So that kind of gives you a quick access to see that information. And then as mentioned, you can actually just mouse over these types to get that type of data about the scope overlaps. And then whenever you go into each subnet, that's where you can actually manage the IP addresses. We make this kind of look and function a lot like any type of spreadsheet managed systems. So that way you can see in a tabular view what's going on per IP address, but you can also set up additional custom fields in case you need to tag a ticket number, a point of contact, or some additional information about those devices or IP addresses, and then have that set in here. One of the last features to also be aware of with the IP address manager is also you can set your reservations in here, and then we actually do keep that information automatically audited history in here, so that you can keep that reservation history, but also your IP address history in here reported in the system. Okay. And then one of the last modules we'll really go over here before we jump over the log event manager is also the patch manager console. So we actually have our SolarWinds Patch Manager, which has the capability of working with WSUS or SCCM server. So we work with just Microsoft servers and workstations, but what we can do is manage those patches so that we can manage all the WSUS servers from our Patch Manager. And we can also work in a similar environment set up like WSUS as well to help you manage those Microsoft patches, but also manage third-party like Sun Java, Adobe, Shockwave, Flash. Let's say you need to manage Chrome or Firefox, but really any EXE or MSI patch is also supported in here. We actually build a package boot assistant utility, so that way in case you need to handle locked files, running processes or running services that you need to stop prior to the install, you can actually run through that package boot assistant utility to help you set those up. And then once the patches are designed and set up, you can actually then schedule those patches to be set up at a specific time period, which is really one of the true limitations of a lot of the WSUS patch management, is once you've approved it, it's, that's when it's been fully approved on the network to be then deployed. So one of the things you can actually set up in our patch manager is the ability for you to set up when you want to apply those patches, and then apply it per group. That way you can set maybe your phase 1 systems, like certain workstations, to run the few days after Patch Tuesday or whenever the patches are now out, and then maybe wait 1 or 2 weeks and then make sure that we've had some successes or verify the failures before we roll out to our mission critical devices, since some of the patches especially have been having some issues as of late in here. So that way you can get that information reported. But then there's also compliance monitoring, so you can find that installed software, installed printers, and information reported back per system. And there's no agent that's required for this module to actually get this information back, so it just makes that pretty simple for management. And then to make sure we have enough time here, just make sure we kind of cover the last product in here is the Log Event Manager. So the Log Event Manager is a little bit different product because all the products I've been showing you are pretty much scheduled polling, or in the patch management phase, it's being run periodically but not all the time. Our Log Event Manager is our real-time event correlation system. So it's a different console, and it's designed to do a real-time correlation, collection, and consolidation of all of your event logs. That way you're getting it from network devices, antiviruses, IDSs, your workstations, gathering all that information, correlating it, and putting it in together into a simple view. Now, since the big thing about log event management systems is that you don't want to have to sit in front of this log event management console here all day, every day, being your main task where then you're checking for login, log-offs, seeing who's accessing what sites, accessing maybe sensitive files, taking ownerships. So one of the real huge supportabilities or functions of the log event manager is actually the ability for you to set up rules. So as Omar mentioned, one of the big rules in here is like, USB devices. So if someone plugs in a USB device, moves certain files, moves sensitive files, if that device was infected, we could automatically take actions in here. And so some of the actions we could actually do is, when I was, so let's say that we wanted to automatically add the user to an Active Directory group. When I was an AD admin, we would actually set up an AD group so they would remove all shares and limit network access. So that could be one of their options. Or what we could do is, if they're running a sensitive process, we could kill that process by name or by ID. Let's say it's a service, so we could stop the service or restart it. We could force log off the system, shut down the system, block the person, log off the user, disable their account. So here's kind of a quick list of some of those actions that we can actually take all automatically without having a user sit at the console here all day, every day, checking to see who's logging in and what's going on with the system. And there's actually over 500 event log rules that are actually built into here, or rule templates, so that way you can just kind of, let's say that we're looking for sensitive files. So say that we have some very sensitive files that we need to be notified whenever a different user takes ownership, or they access the files, or they copy those files. So here I just looked up under file audit, so we could see, take ownership, unauthorized share, delete sensitive files, inappropriate file access, restricted information. So there's quite a number of information, or quite a number of rules in here. Logs, so keylogger information. Let's say someone was doing port scanner. There's port scans, so that we could block our IP address. So that's actually one way you can then have those automated rules and keep that simplicity of understanding when unauthorized users are coming in, and then also meeting a lot of your STIG and FSMA requirements of access monitoring, login monitoring, audit monitoring. All that's coming in through here. Now, if you do need to do any additional searches on demand, we actually have some areas in here so you can actually explore in depth. So that way, in case we need to search for a specific time period, you can always go in and search for logs. And then based on how you visually work as a technician, you can actually utilize the work cloud and get that in a full view based upon keywords, or a tree map, maybe a bar chart or a line chart, or you just like to work in the raw logs themselves. So we can actually get that log information, and then if I'm looking for a certain user and click on that field or whatever data, hit play, and then I'm now focused on those specific logs. Now if I need to turn this around and turn this to a security admin, I can then also export this information, or I can just add this to the dashboard, so that way whenever I log in, I could then at a glance see some of my most recent reports. That way I could see like which ones are going for TCP traffic auditing. I could get that automatically reported back over here. Or maybe if I want to see events by user, I click on that user and then I can get some of their event log information. Now, also be aware that the last thing about the Log Event Manager is there's a full reporting system that is available, so that we can also cover a lot of the PCI, SOX, DISA-STIG, COCA, FISMA type of reports in there. They do cover a lot of the, pretty much cover all facets of the ITIL process, so that you can definitely see a lot of that, file audit, access, configuration changes as they are occurring. Okay, great. So I just want to make sure here we had enough time here. So I just want to go ahead, and we pretty much covered all the modules here. So I just want to go ahead and open it up for any type of questions that anyone might have here. So let me go ahead and put us. Yep. So now we're in kind of the Q&A area. So if anyone has any questions.
Thank you.
Yep, and just make sure to make sure you just use the chat window if you have any additional questions, real quick.
Well, thanks, Sean, for covering all the products and doing a great demonstration. I'm sure everybody was definitely enjoying that. So one of the questions that just came in was, let's see, it's coming from Martin, and it is saying, let's see, is the dashboard set up per admin, or do all the admins see the same? I can take that question. So the dashboard is set up per user or by group of users. One of the things that we really strive on at SolarWinds is to make this product as easy as possible, all of our products, I should say, and particularly you can customize just about everything in there. So you can have a login where a group or a user comes in. They can customize their own dashboards without affecting anybody else if you wanted to do that. And you can also have very, very granular restrictions to what they can or cannot see. So yes, they're all customizable, and each user can create their own dashboard. So the next question that came in is, where can we find more details on using your products for FISMA or STIG compliance? Well, if we refer back to one of the slides, there's going to be a full listing of all the links. So you will receive a copy of the slide presentation, and you can refer back to that one slide with all the different links. So the next question came in. It says, does SolarWinds have an appliance or software only? SolarWinds is software only. All of our software do have hardware requirements, which can be seen on the SolarWinds website, but it's software only. There are no hardware appliances. So another question came in, is there a module to do deep dive packet analysis between hosts inbound or outbound through a next-gen firewall or other type of device? Not exactly what you're looking for, but the Network Performance Monitor does have a feature called User Experience, and it is our deep packet inspection feature. And that feature will allow you to basically run a continuous sniffer trace, identify what protocols you would like to monitor, what applications you'd like to monitor, and then it correlates the data for you. It does this by using a network sensor that you would install on a Windows machine, connected to the SPAN or mirror port or any kind of network tap on a switch, for instance, and then identify which protocols the application you want to monitor. We also give you a server sensor which gets installed on an application server and measures the time to first byte, and you're able to correlate the two to determine where a response time issue resides. Another question is, have the rules been made to the NIST control numbers? So they're not exactly matrixed to the NIST control numbers, but the different rules do cover what's in a NIST or a STIG compliance requirement. Another question came in and says, you've covered a lot of areas today. What are the top 3 things we can do to improve our security posture? Well, as you said, we did cover quite a bit. It kind of depends on your requirements, but I would suggest probably looking at, well, first of all, if you don't know what's on your network, you can't really secure it. So the Network Performance Monitor, the Orion platform, which all these different products reside on, does do an auto discovery as part of it, one of its features, and that auto discovery could be put on a schedule, so you can have it scheduled on whatever time period you like. So that would be a good place to start. As Sean mentioned, and it was earlier mentioned as well, the Network Configuration Manager can identify vulnerabilities in your iOS firmware. It also provides you the STIG report so that you can make sure that there are no holes in the configuration so that a hacker could possibly use those. The Login Event Manager, a very powerful tool, the last one that Sean covered, providing you with all that correlation data, being able to determine, anything from, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 10 machines and you get an admin logging in to all 10 machines and failing their login within a 10-second period. It's more than likely not that the admin is making a mistake. Someone's probably trying to break into your network. So these tools, in combination with each other, can provide you a well-rounded security plan to help you with improving your security posture. Okay, let's see. Another question just came in, said, I hate writing scripts. Do we need to write scripts for the Login Event Manager? Well, as Sean identified earlier and showed you the demo, there is no scripting involved at all with the Login Event Manager. Everything is done in a drag and drop and a very visual format. That way you do not have to write any scripts. You just drag things and drop. As a matter of fact, one of the examples that Sean showed you was a good example of that. So there's no scripting involved. And then, let's see. There is, does SolarWinds have an integrity checker to detect unauthorized software and firmware changes? Sean, I'll go ahead and pass that on to you.
Actually, so we don't have, so the only thing we really have is in the Login Event Manager really is just the file integrity monitoring system so that we can see whether a file takes ownership or shares a system. But we really don't have anything specifically to detect unauthorized software or firmware changes. Really just depends upon, if you have network devices, you could utilize the Configuration Manager to be monitored about your real-time change detection since it would show, whenever someone changes the boot. But we don't have anything specifically that covers some of that software. Oh, actually, Omar, there's a question in here. It says, is there a way to correlate host-level inbound and outbound data while no malicious actors? Actually, that was one of the features in not the most recent release of Login Event Manager, but the previous release of Login Event Manager was the threat detection. In fact, I actually worked pretty well on my system because one of the biggest things that they actually just posted this week was open FTP servers, and I've actually been monitoring a lot of open FTP check traffic recently, especially now they're coming in locally but worldwide, especially from foreign countries, and it definitely does track and let you know IP addresses of those foreign actors. And we don't give you like geolocation, but we'll actually give you ideas about what foreign systems that we are seeing a lot of login failures from that are just being denied specifically from those systems, especially because you'll just see a lot of just denials and no ever success from those IPs.
Another question just came in, and it says that we are in an offline classified secured environment and have no access to the internet. Will SolarWinds work in that environment? Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, 99.9% of our customers, our federal customers, are in offline environments. So the SolarWinds software does not need access to the internet. There are a couple of modules that have some features that you could use, but they're not necessary to have connected to the internet. Even our licensing activation module, or activation is also, we also have an offline version of that. So the answer to that question is no, you do not have to be connected to the internet. Now, as mentioned earlier, there was the NIST National Vulnerability Database, which the Network Configuration Manager accesses if you are online. If you're not online, you can certainly download that information. So that's the answer there. So there is another question about, is there a way to actively permit or deny IPs that traffic to or from those well-known actors, nation states, etc.? Yes, there is a way. The Log Event Manager has another feature that we did not mention. It's kind of still in, it's its first iteration, but we do have something called an active threat feed. So the threat feed will identify bad actors. Right now, the feed needs access to the internet, so it's still, like I said, it's in its first iteration. But that will identify any bad IPs. And once those bad IPs are identified, of course, you can set up rules to block those IPs if need be. But again, that's just in its first iteration, and right now you have to be online to access that feed. And we also provide you the feed right now. In a future release, that will be an offline, as well as being able to provide your own feed for that. Okay, we have a few questions that have not been answered. And all those questions are being annotated, and we'll be responding to those in the next couple of days. So please keep asking your questions here. We will get to those questions. And with that, I'm going to forward the slide one more. There's some additional resources here that you can visit, both on our Thwack. And by the way, just want to make sure that you guys realize that you should go to our Thwack user forum. There's hundreds of thousands of people on that forum. They share problems. They share experiences, and our product managers as well as our development team do go through those blogs and those forums, and we get a lot of ideas for new features based on those feature requests. So please go there, visit that. There's quite a bit of video demos on our website. All of our products can be downloaded for free and used for 30 days with a couple of exceptions, but completely unrestricted. So please take advantage of that. Of course, you can visit our website as well as call our federal sales team to schedule a demo of any one of these products, or if you have any other further questions. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us this morning, and we look forward to sharing our next webinar with you guys in the future. Thank you and have a wonderful day.